I've come to Florence in search of what I believe to be an as yet unrecognized piece by Michelangelo, painted when he was 13 years old. I spent the day at the church of Santa Maria Novella. When Michelangelo was 13, in 1488, he was part of the Ghirlandaio studio. The Ghirlandaio studio had been contracted to create frescoes for this church. Michelangelo was under contract to Ghirlandaio to learn the art of fresco and, Vasari says, to paint. He's quite specific about this. The young man was not simply supposed to mix paints and sweep up the studio. He was to create art. That's Ghirlandaio. And this is the panel I'm interested in. In particular, I'm interested in this figure off to the side. He's probably St. John the Baptist. Now, the Ghirlandaio studio was a large, thriving studio. There were lots of artists, lots of assistants, and certainly Ghirlandaio himself did not want to paint every square inch of this fresco. He would have jobbed out a lot of it to his assistants. He didn't want to paint all those stairs and all those shadows. He would have handled the principal figures. But this figure off to the side doesn't really fit. He's aloof. He looks like he's been painted by a different hand. The use of reflected light is distinctly different. Now, this could have been anybody, but I think we might have a clue as to whether or not this is, as I'm obviously about to suggest, done by a 13-year-old Michelangelo. Raphael of Urbino was destined to become Michelangelo's principal adversary. I believe that while in Florence, Raphael saw the frescoes of the church of Santa Maria Novella, and someone told him that the figure in question was painted by Michelangelo at the age of 13. Raphael made his way to Rome, where Michelangelo was painting the Sistine ceiling. Raphael had been working on the papal stanzas only a few yards away from where Michelangelo was working on the Sistine ceiling. We are told that one night Raphael snuck into the Sistine Chapel in order to see what Michelangelo was doing. After seeing the Sistine ceiling, Raphael returned to his work, particularly the fresco titled The School of Athens, and found a place for a new figure. He carved away some of the existing plaster and created an image of a man sitting separate. This was a considerable nod to Michelangelo. Raphael was his principal rival. Raphael wanted to finish the Sistine ceiling. Thank God he wasn't given permission to do that. There are other figures in Ghirlandaio's paintings that are suggestive of Michelangelo's hand, but they're not quite as convincing, I believe, as this piece. I think the parallel between Raphael's painting of Michelangelo and this Ghirlandaio painting of the seated near-nude figure is very suggestive. In later years, Michelangelo insisted that he'd never learned anything from Ghirlandaio, which we know to be untrue. Michelangelo says that when he was 13 years old and Ghirlandaio saw his drawings, he swore he, Ghirlandaio, would never draw again because he couldn't possibly compete. That strikes me as nonsense. What's interesting here is the possibility that Ghirlandaio did in fact hire Michelangelo because he understood him to be a brilliant artist and gave him the opportunity to showcase it on the fresco in this secondary character. What we're seeing here, I believe, is the prototype for a series of figures known as the Ignudi that Michelangelo painted on the Sistine ceiling. The Ignudi were influenced by the Laocoon and by the Belvedere torso, and we can see the shift in emphasis on musculature and mass and a contorted and more interesting posture. But nevertheless, I think that there is a strong suggestion that what we are seeing once again is the 13-year-old Michelangelo setting the stage for work that he would do for decade after decade on to the end of his life and changing Western art forever. If this conjecture is accurate, we have Ghirlandaio to thank for a lot more than just getting Michelangelo moving in an artistic career or being the launching pad for his study of sculpture in the Medici Sculpture Garden. He gave Michelangelo a chance to put his artwork, his unique artwork, his particular signature on a fresco which would forever be known as something by Ghirlandaio. The next time you're around teenagers, look at a 13-year-old boy. That's how young Michelangelo was when he was working in the Ghirlandaio studio, regardless of what he was doing there. Now imagine that he's on a scaffold painting this figure that has lasted for 500 years, and we get some idea of what kind of a force of nature we're dealing with. This is why I study Michelangelo.